Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. It's Monday, February 24th. Netflix has a new show out. It stars Robert De Niro, Jesse Plemons, Lizzy Caplan, Joan Allen. Boy, what a cast. It keeps going, but in this first episode, you actually don't see everybody. Dan Stevens
I
is
know,
there.
he's supposed to show
Connie
up.
Britton
You
is
do
out
get
there.
Angela Bassett, though, as the president.
That's right. Angela Bassett is also. I couldn't fit them all in just the intro, but 0 Day, it follows a former president played by De Niro. He's pulled out of retirement after a cyber attack leaves the country paralyzed. He's asked to lead this special task force that the Senate or the Congress has put into place to find out who is responsible. They can ignore habeas corpus, so they can just pick people up off the street and not explain to them why they're going to jail, and just whoever they think for a second. So he's going to be given all this power.
Right, George Mullen.
And he might have dementia. That's the big
They did make
cliffhanger.
it seem like he was going to be Logan Roy. That's what I got when
That is,
that
I did
twist
not
kinda
take a
came.
succession jump, but it is prescient to politics in a way that I think Jesse Armstrong tried to make Succession. The difference here is that you got three creators, right? One was like the Narcos dude, Eric Newman. The other one is actually like mixed up with some of the Harvey Weinstein scandal from a few years back. He was named by Ronan Farrow as having trying to stop the reporting of that. And so it's interesting to see him part of a show running thing here. And then Michael Schmidt, who is the most attuned to this sort of I guess, plot line, because he was a New York Times journalist correspondent. He covers national security, federal law enforcement, and he broke the story of the private email server stuff from Hillary Clinton's run, and then also the Mueller report. And Mueller is who I would probably compare Robert De Niro's character to the most, besides every president ever, because they try to put everything on him. He has a dead son.
Right.
He stepped down after 4 years, similar to Biden.
And he probably would have won re-election, though.
Yeah, but he had more bipartisan support. In the first 10 minutes, they really define his character. Here's all the things I picked up. First of all, he lives in a suite now, very similar to ex-President Marsden, James Marsden's suite in Paradise.
Yeah, like when he was going through his whole routine, that's what I connected with.
And what is
100%.
his routine? He takes pills in the morning, Lipitor, because he's old, swim, he jogs, he walks his dog. His dog's name is Dell. And then he also hikes. He gets these daily briefings, which I think Biden and Trump, they had both like canceled each other's briefings. They don't like each other, so they definitely like stopped the other president from getting that. But because he's a like president, he still gets his briefings. There's a bird feeder that he is very like he's in retirement age. So all he cares about is his like immediate surroundings. His daughter is in the Senate, I think. And like I said, his son is dead and his wife is trying to become a federal judge.
He continually says, he must have said it like several times throughout the episode, how even when he's offered the job, he doesn't want to go back into the public eye. He's a former president. That's kind of all he wants to be.
They hinted at strongly when at the very beginning, he's also writing a book and they bring in a ghostwriter to help him. And this is one of the first people who died because of the cyber attack. But she is under the impression that he stepped down after 4 years just because out of the goodwill of his heart. And he said there were also rumors out there leading to like sort of the Reagan rumors, the Joe Biden rumors that maybe he has dementia. And to be then taking on such a big responsibility might be also part of the reason. I'm just surprised none of his family echoed that to him. Instead, they were just saying, this is an abuse of power by the government. We can't have an agency exist that is literally able to look kind of Patriot Act style into everybody's lives and take them apart in case, just by the circumstance that they might be somewhat related, if not 100% confirmed related to the incident.
And even Alexandra Mullen, who was just the congresswoman played by Caplan, she doesn't really echo
Alex. Oh yeah, because they just call her Alex.
Right, because there's a big rift between the two of them.
She is more liberal, I would say, and is going to not approve this agency, but she is one vote out of many, so this thing is going to get approved. And his ending argument is, wouldn't you rather me be in charge of this rather than some other crazy wacko dude? I think the crazy wacko dude is going to be played by Dan Stevens or by, what was the other senator the House of Representatives guy?
You're talking about Matthew Modin. His name was Richard Dreyer in the show.
Yeah, and we only see him to pop up to kind of wave and say he's in the series, but I think he's going to play the anchor piece that's going to be like trying to really push forward the the most negative, try to push the country in the worst direction. Yeah, so the first 10 minutes are all about this definition. We see also that he was an ex-Vietnam, so very similar to his character in Deer Hunter.
Yep.
And he had a dead friend from then.
John Flanagan, he said.
And that's who influenced him to become a prosecutor, and then after that joined politics. And then I think the years that he was running in office was 2008.
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
I believe so, yeah. It's 2008, and,
So was it 2008 to 2012, I would assume, in this world?
I think so. I was trying to get a good time limit, but I don't think they ever say. They only ever show you the days.
There's a lot
0
of
day plus 1 plus 2 plus 3.
Yeah, there's a lot of little Easter eggs they're throwing in there, but they don't really it's very ambiguous. Like, the cyber attack is ambiguous, how it happened, who's responsible. His dementia is very ambiguous, and also just, like, zoning in on anything in particular, which makes this series, I think, its biggest fault, which is that it's too afraid to really do anything of substance. It's trying to appeal to every conspiracy out there by not honing in on one.
It reminded me a lot of Revolution. I saw that, I think, like 10 years ago when it came out. It followed the same idea, but that was more apocalypse driven about just like all technology
And
just
this
not
should
working.
be an apocalyptic show.
It's just for me, I felt that the concept and the way they did it came across as very silly. Like about 20 minutes in.
10 really is when she gets hit by the
Well,
car.
honestly, I thought that when the ghostwriter died, that was kind of shocking to me. That
Yeah.
was something that I liked about the show.
Well, it was the beginning, and I thought we were going to see all these other things, but then we cut to Wolf Blitzer, and he's
Right.
just like, "This is the worst day in America."
Wolf Blitzer, who seems to like to play himself in everything. Skyfall, Mission Impossible, Fallout, the campaign, now this. It's just
Yeah, okay, I didn't even realize that.
But yeah, no, then he's kind of George Mullen is taken by Roger Carlson, who's played by Jesse Plemons, and they go to New York, right?
Okay, so let's talk about the cyber attack, though.
Right.
It takes out the grid for 1 minute in the US. That's what they say. And then in the description for the show, it says it's a global takeout. But really, I think it is only a national one. So I think it only is, and I couldn't get a figure, but I felt like in a real news reporting situation, they would be throwing out the amount of civilians who were impacted
Right.
all the time. At least put a guesstimate out there.
The number would probably be rising too.
Yeah, the only thing I could see, which I wonder if they just give it later on in the show, was like 3,000, which really isn't that many people for a whole global takeout of the grid for 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, there's like how many people in the world? Like 7 billion?
Did it in the US, there's about 350 million. But did it remind you of Mr. Robot at all? And how when the grid was taken out there?
Yeah, that was usually done by like F Society or something like
Right,
that. Yeah.
but I'm talking about in the first season when people still make fun of, if you're way into the technical side of things, that like him being as shocked as he was over what happened, that shouldn't have been his response to it. But that's part of what I think they're trying to avoid here. They don't want to fall into a trap where they seem like they don't know what they're talking about. So they, again, keep it ambiguous.
Right.
And yes, so the aftermath of that is Roger showing up at the doorstep. He's like the White House liaison with the ex-president. He's trying to get the ex-president on the White House's behalf, at least at first, to make a public appearance where?
It's in the middle of like New York City, right?
Middle of Manhattan.
And so this is the biggest problem I had with
I think
this
I'm going to agree
series.
with this one.
Because you start to hear he kind of walks out. The public is seeing him. A lot of
Well,
people.
it takes a little egging to get him to agree.
Right.
But then once
Because
he
again,
does,
he's not wanting to leave. But once he agrees, they finally make it to New York City, and there's a huge crowd of people. The crowd of people start throwing out conspiracies, saying like, "I'm sure there's actually not people that have died. They're all crisis actors."
some people are holding up pictures of loved ones that they still don't know where they are because of like under the subways and stuff. The people have been lost and stuff like that. But they're in the midst of it has to be hundreds to thousands of people, right? In the middle of New York on a slow day. New York is so loud, and yet this is an old man, 5'10". That's how tall Robert De Niro is, and he's in the center of it. The NYPD is there. The police are there. There's things burning buildings in the background.
Yeah.
And he's able to quell the crowd, right?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. He gives the most, what I felt, uncompelling Chat GPT. What do you say to make a courageous speech? But it was just stuff like, we have to band together as New Yorkers. There are people that are like throwing things. They're throwing out conspiracies, and yet somehow at the end of this 2-minute speech, where it's really nothing amazing that
It's
he
a very
says,
basic speech.
everybody claps, and apparently
everybody claps.
his public approval rating goes straight up.
It's a Pepsi moment, and his approval rating was never down, I think,
Right.
is what they were trying to say.
But he becomes such a public figure because of this terrible 2-minute speech
I
that
agree
he's
with
given
you,
the 0 day
but how did
commission
anybody
thing.
hear that speech? because again, with the loudness of New York, all they needed to do in that script was hand him a loudspeaker. But I guess maybe if he had a loudspeaker, he would look less, I don't know, official. But everyone was able to hear him clearly in that entire crowd when he is being yelled at, and everybody is just, it's a raucous, you know?
I didn't even pick up on that, but you're 100% right. My biggest problem was just what he was saying. There was nothing in it. I mean, like,
I
even
think it was
politicians
just
get better
public
answers.
appearances can sometimes work to the benefit of the person that's there. And it happened to do so. What it influences is that the president now then asks him, says, oh, he's the perfect person to lead this force because he's already got them on his side. And if he screws up, then it's on him and not on me, right?
Mhm.
And so he doesn't want to do it at first because you got his daughter saying, this is absolutely unconventional. You don't want to go into this. You got the CIA lead who he still has connections with,
Bill Camp.
Jeremy, Bill Camp. We've seen him before, but at this point, he's just a throwaway name in a million. And he's saying, don't do it. They go into this cone of silence, get smart.
Yeah, that
room.
was
That
so
was
you
cool.
so you I said get smart as well. That was I mean that was
Well, the
cool.
Get Smart version
But
is
it
funny.
just felt like it was so like, do you think that actually exists? That felt ridiculous to me.
Maybe.
I
Maybe
mean,
it
that
does,
was like
maybe it doesn't.
it's like the whole entire thing is soundproof
Right.
and
I'm
like
sure they have soundproof rooms in the CIA.
right, but I mean the way that it
Yeah.
like shut out
I
all the
wasn't sure if it was
windows.
trying to tell us that his memory just phased it out too. Like it could have been an interesting play on that. Then we find out that there's like this Russian guy that's sneaking around the consulate. He's also going to different parts of New York, meeting with people who are talking about the mysterious Felix. That's the most we get on the cyber attack, is it's been conducted by someone like in the Mr. Robot, a Felix agency who has been using an enormous amount of power that they thought was being used to get Bitcoin, but instead was used to shut down
Well,
all the devices everywhere.
we should probably also mention that during the attack, the message "this will happen again" showed up on everybody's phone. So whatever is going to happen next is not going to be good. That's the main reason why they're putting George Mullen in that spot.
Anybody, again, from the technical logical side, I would think that the Michael Schmidt guy would have pointed out that like a 0-day scenario is very, 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 very unlikely, because although there's a lot of antiquated systems that we have that are susceptible and vulnerable to hacking, being able to control as much as they did with no one being able to put anything together, that is
Yep.
also very uncredible. Now, if we keep on demonetizing and firing all our people in the U.S. Who are responsible for security, cybersecurity, and such, then we will be facing a more likelihood of this sort of issue. But like, out of all the things that they're on the nose about, stealing literal, like, we're going to give the background of this president the same background of almost every other president.
Yeah.
They're not doing it so much here. Like, this is just one of many scenarios that I feel like they could have perfected a little bit more in order for it to come off more effectively.
I think a big problem also is that I just don't care about any of the characters. They do give you a lot of backstory with George Mullen, as we've talked about, but I just did not care. The only person
You don't like that Jesse Plemons and Lizzy
I was
Caplan,
just about to
they
say
had like a relationship in the past. They hate each other now.
I was just about to say that Roger, Jesse Plemons, is the only character that I care about in the show, and that's just because I'm such a big Jesse Plemons fan.
I find it
think.
funny that he approached the president and he was like, the White House wants you to make a public appearance. Later on, we find out through Alex that he actually approached the White House and said, hey, would you mind if the ex-president makes a public appearance? So he is career motivated. However, I think we're supposed to think that he's like a good character in the end. Like, he's not a terrible person. He just is very open to being greedy.
But did you care about George Mullen's character at all in the series?
I don't think it was poorly acted. I think like it was almost offensive that we're supposed to believe that this emergency is the worst thing the world has ever seen, or at least the US has ever seen.
Right.
And yet they speak about it in such a laid back fashion. Like, Robert De Niro is on 1,000 cotton sheets, or like those, what are they? 1,000 threaded sheets, as he's speaking to his wife about this big tragedy. It just doesn't feel that tragic when you are able to, when it doesn't look like it. You're
And
not
that's
seeing the
yeah.
one-on-one.
Well,
Yeah.
but basically, when you kind of dive into the tragedy of something and you hear about all the stories and everything, that's when you really care for like in the episode, just for the characters and everything. But they focus so little, like you're talking about, on it, with the details, with the amount of people that died, that it just doesn't seem that serious.
And the director is the same person they got from Homeland, which did achieve being able, and the Americans, making you feel like the threat was real.
Right.
So I don't think it was the direction. I don't think it was the acting.
I think that when it
and
comes,
I don't think it was even the detail level, because they have an extreme amount of detail here when it comes to background information about characters, but it's not enough about the plot itself, about the cyber threat itself to be interesting. It's just way too basic in
When
that
it
way.
comes to the pros for the show, I thought that it was timely. There was that. It was shot well, and like you said, that the acting was good. But it's just like you have this insane cast. Like any one of them can lead their own show. Forget
Right.
just being like a recurring character. That like you said earlier, it's insulting because it's like, how was the script? It seems like it needed several rewrites before being like really
The
good.
only time though that I really rolled my eyes was at the very end cliffhanger when when he found his journal because he had gotten a phone call from his one contact who we didn't talk about. He has one contact, this Russian mole who gives him
Nathan, yeah.
who gives him information and says you might not hear from me again, but then ends up hearing from him in the middle of the night with this very important thing being like this is going to solve all your issues, it explains everything.
Right.
And so he writes it down and then we don't hear about it till the next day when the guy calls him again and says I was right. And then he disappears off the phone. The president goes running in, has sort of a panic attack, an Alzheimer's attack, opens up his safe and finds that his journal just says who killed Bambi a bunch of times. Like, see, he's a schizophrenic.
Yeah.
That's not really how I think Alzheimer's works. Like, so
Right.
he even says, he's like, I don't think I wrote this. I think someone else switched out my journal and he's freaking out about it. But then we finally find out that he absolutely is having hallucinations because he goes back into his house. And the person we've been seeing at the cooking station the
Hector.
whole time, Hector, ends up being a completely different guy. And
Name
Hector retired
Wayne.
5 years ago.
Yeah, I
according
was
to his
wondering if we were dealing with some type of paradise situation where it was like time travel, but the more likely option is just, yeah, he's kind of losing his mind and we're
Well,
going to
it
have
does.
to.
Yeah, it's not time travel because we see it say 0 day 1 and
Yeah,
then 0 day 3. So it's not
true.
like we jumped 5 years into the future and he didn't realize. So yeah, it's been interestingly received. What would your ultimate rating for this episode be?
There are parts that have potential, but overall, this was slow and monotonous. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10.
A 4 out of 10. That's low.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Washington Post said it was a muddy story. USA Today called it dull. TV Guide called it misguided boomer fantasy. IGN also gave it a 4 out of 10. Monumentally stupid, as enjoyable as a cyber attack. Variety says fails the cast. Slant says the equivalent of dead air. Vulture says not now 0 day. Roger Ebert compared its pacing to The Snowman. And
Wow.
AV Club said it's timely, but Jesse Plemons can't save it.
Hey, that's basically what I was saying.
Guardian gave it 4 stars. Telegraph gave it 3 stars. These are all UK papers at this point, and the Independent gave it 2 stars. So, and ABC called it a suspenseful nail biter. It wasn't a particularly positive article, so negatively received. I think Bill Goodykoontz of the Arizona Republic gave it a pretty good review, though. So there are those out there. And
It was
as far as the
strange.
fans were, the ones who seemed to enjoy it the most were the ones who just binged the whole thing real quick. And none of them were like, this is the best series you'll ever see. They were just like, it was entertaining enough. So if people like conspiracy thrillers, this might fit the bill.
But there's so many that are coming out now, I don't feel like it needs to. Like, I don't think there's something that needs to
If you
fit
can
the
get
bill.
past the fact that the cast should be better or in a better thing, then maybe you'll enjoy it more. Because it's a lot just disappointment in the fact that they're not being able to use their full potential.
The "this will happen again" message reminded me a lot of Skyfall when it had the "think on your sins" message, and that also had a Wolf Blitzer cameo. So I just found that funny, but yeah.
Yeah, a younger Wolf Blitzer, right? A
Yes.
little bit more black in his hair at that point. Yeah, so anything else that you want to say about the actual episode, who you think is going to be involved? If I had to make a prediction, and this is the funny part, I don't know where it's going, but it feels like it's posing a lot of questions that I don't really care about
Yeah,
where it's going.
right.
Like, is his dementia going to take over? Is the world going to be able to stop this existential threat from happening again? That would be the one guiding factor, but it doesn't seem like Alex's role as just this random senator is going to impact it. Like, why include a lot of these characters if really it's just a story about his immediate leverage group?
I feel like Dan Stevens is going to be the big bad whenever he's introduced.
He's playing a Tucker Carlson type character.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I feel like he's probably going to be the villain. Other
Which
than
they
that,
did in Homeland when they had an Alex Jones type.
right, I remember you saying that. I remember Alex Jones talking about that. But even afterwards, it's either that or we haven't been introduced to who it is yet. They're keeping the villain under wraps
I mean,
until like
Matthew
the
Modine.
finale.
or
True.
Modine, I
But
think.
Richard Dryer, it seems like, is more he doesn't only care about himself, it's just he seems to be very antagonistic towards George Mullen.
Making the bad guys clearly the Russians in the first episode makes me think that by the sixth episode, there will be like a twist where they're not 100% responsible, or maybe they were hired by an inside agency within the US, something 24 like.
Yeah.
But yeah, who would you say should continue watching?
I mean, if you like Robert De Niro, you're probably going to like this as well.
Anyone who likes Robert De Niro is going to like this?
I mean, he's in almost every scene.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
bye.